Hello, welcome to another Talking Objects with me, Tim Pestell, Curator of Archaeology at Norwich Castle Museum and Art Gallery. Today what I'd like to talk about is something called a Papal Bulla. And you might well ask, what on earth is a Papal Bulla? And the answer is, it's a seal, or rather it's a lead seal of the sort that would have been suspended from a papal document that would have been issued from the papal court in the medieval period. And these were suspended on a ribbon or a string from the document. And the string would have passed through the centre of the actual bulla and then have been looped through the document so that they were completely tied together. And that would have meant that if the string was intact and hadn't been knotted, you could tell that it was actually a genuine issue from the papal court that hadn't been fiddled around with, and it was a proof of the document's authenticity. Now, the documents that were sealed with these sorts of lead seals, of papal bull seals, are quite interesting because they are called bulls, and that ultimately is a name that derived from the actual bulla that was attached to them, this sort of pendant seal. And these were actually relatively common in the medieval period because there were an enormous number of documents that were issued by the papacy, and they could cover all sorts of things, varying from the appointment of a particular priest to a church to the land holdings that might be confirmed for an abbey to say that they did genuinely own them. And so they could come in various forms, and this meant in turn that there were an awful lot of documents being churned out from the papal chancery, and there are some estimates that there might have been up to 50,000 documents a year. Now that equates to an awful lot of lead that has to be used, let alone the number of sheep that have to be flayed to produce the parchment that's needed. This particular bulla is an entirely typical one. It's of Innocent IV, who was the Pope between 1243 and 1254, and on the one side you have his name being shown in 3 lines, Innocent, and then the PP shortening of his papal name and the regnal issue 4. And then on the other side you have an entirely typical arrangement of St Paul and then St Peter divided by a central cross. Now, this is a very standard bulla, but the one that I'd like to talk to you about is this. And it's particularly curious because you can see that while it has this traditional arrangement of Paul and Peter on the one side, the guardians of Rome, the other side doesn't have the Pope's name. Instead, it's been completely scraped down and it's been recarved to form a seal matrix. In other words, it's the sort of stamper that you would push into wax to create a seal that would seal a document. So they've used something that is an actual lead seal and created a matrix from it to still be used in the sealing process. It's a really curious thing, but it's something that we're beginning to see on an increasing number of papal bullae. And it seems that something that has been issued from Rome might well have taken on an added value or importance. Maybe it becomes used as a sort of amulet or a good luck charm. As it's something sent from Rome, it might have been seen as something of particularly religious significance, something of a good luck charm that's actually come from the holy city itself. But in this particular case, the arms of a new family have been discovered, or at least the new arms of an existing family that's known. And the seal seems to read, the seal of Robert, son of Walter de Bessingham. And this is particularly interesting because the seal matrix in this particular case was found by a metal detectorist, Tracy MacDonald, in 1998 in the parish of Gresham in North Norfolk. And Gresham lies, or the fine spot of this, lies adjacent to the parish of Bessingham, and in this particular case, only about 430 metres from the parish boundary. And perhaps even more interesting, it's only about 3/4 of a kilometre, 750 metres from Bessingham Castle, which is actually a moated manorial site, which is quite probably where the Bessingham family used as their head house, from which they could administer their estates. So in this particular case, we have a seal matrix that has been personalised from quite an ordinary type of papal seal. So you go from something like this, which is relatively common, to something like this. And the tragedy is, of course, we don't know which pope issued this document because the name of the pope has been completely scraped away. It's likely to be 13th century because we know that from the numbers of finds of these papal bull seals, that's when most of these papal issues using seals of this type seem to have been sent out from the papal chancery. So it's an interesting conundrum. We don't actually know when Robert was alive. We have an undated charter from him. It's likely to be 13th or 14th century in date, and it shows the medieval use and reuse of these sorts of documents and objects that were sent out from the papal chancery. I hope you found this brief little insight into what looks a very humble piece of lead interesting, and if you have, then please do watch other of our talking objects here. Thank you very much.